Hi, friends. Host Eric here, host of Talking with Famous People, and I want to talk a little bit about the debate that I had last night with Matt and what that sort of reveals about the importance of form and structure to a certain extent. It's very difficult to debate somebody if it's not clear what resolution is being debated, it's not clear who's affirming, it's not clear who's negating, and it's just a matter of both parties trying to win the perceptual contest of whose frame is predominant. It's so that kind of thing that happened last night in that debate, which was not as bad as the one before, which was with Jack. With Jack, it happened. It was just like, oh my god, this quality of not understanding what it means to debate. To debate means to try your hardest to understand what your opponent's best positioning of their argument. Understand how you could, like to not to ever attack a weaker version of their argument, to always attack the strongest version of their argument, because that's the only way you can meaningfully said to be have addressed it. To attack the strongest form of their argument, you need to get clarity from them as to what their argument is. Concurrently, if you're asked questions, you want to be very clear about what you mean. You want to give the person as stuff to work with, because otherwise you're just being evasive and work's not being done. Now, there's something in the debate called Clash. I'm going to play some clips here in a second. Something in the debate called Clash, and Clash means it's not fireworks. It's actually engaging two lines of argumentation, actually engaging each other. So when when a knowledgeable judge is done evaluating a round, writes down the winner or whatever. If it was a terrible round, then they might write no clash in this round! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Which means the parties were not actually addressing what each other said. So I want to play a clip now of a cross-examination of what it looks like when people do address what is being said and ask and answer questions appropriately. There is a purpose to asking and answering questions. And you want to afford your opponent as much opportunity to work with your own ideas as you want to work with your opponent's ideas. So that means you need clarity. Without clarity about what exactly is meant, which means a willingness to be pinned down as well as to pin down, then there's no progress is going to be made in any kind of argumentation. Just ask me as many questions until you sort of feel like you've exhausted the questioning, okay? I'm not going to time it.
Okay. So first, how do you explain your value stability in comparison to other non-virtue values?
Well, can you give me an example of another non-virtue value?
Defensibility.
Well, civility would subsume defensibility because to be while defensible things are defensible always, they're not necessarily both civil and defensible. So in that regard, civility is a broader value and ought to be prioritized because ultimately it doesn't matter how defensible something you say is.
So wouldn't you agree that we want a narrower value rather than a broader value? Otherwise, it's too hard to determine how we should weigh this round.
Well, I'm saying that if you're going to contrast these two specifically, my position is civility is a much better value than defensibility because it includes the views of people who aren't necessarily good at arguing.
Okay, and your value criterion of optimizing democratic habits, don't you agree we could do that under values other than civility?
Well, my value criterion doesn't have to be unique to my value. It's true that you could optimize democratic habits under some value other than civility. I'm saying the best way to uphold the value of civility is by optimizing democratic habits.
Okay, so you have three blocks, correct? Your block one about voting laws precluding civility, second block about psychology, and third about the Middle East.
Yeah, plus the framework block.
Yeah, plus framework. So when you say that civility in your first block that you obtain civility by getting rid of polarization, wouldn't you? Isn't it true that if we were to have more people voting, there'd be more polarized votes?
Um, if we had more what voting?
If there were more people voting overall, then wouldn't it be more polarized, not less?
Um, no. My position is that it would be less polarized.
And if I could prove otherwise, would I win that point?
If you could prove otherwise, you'd win that point. Yeah. In other words, if you win that point, you win that point. True.
Oh, true. Um, so you get inherency from the existing polarization for your first block.
Um, yes, that's part. Well, also the directionality of the polarization. In other words, the fact that it's increasing, not just that it is.
Okay, and you're saying that we will eliminate this polarization on the app?
I'm saying we have some solvency for it. We're not, I don't have to solve it
Okay.
completely.
So for me to win, all I have to do is prove that you do not decrease polarization. Second, that there are no psychological benefits, and third, that the Middle East will not benefit. Is that correct? The three things I have to win on.
I mean, or more broadly, you have to win by showing that optimizing democratic habits in the way that I indicate does not, in fact, uphold the value of civility if you want to win under my framework.
Okay, so the scholarly literature articulates five categories of impact related to compulsory voting research, which are that compulsory voting enhances democracy and legitimacy, that compulsory voting increases voter turnout, that compulsory voting promotes equal turnout, and that compulsory voting increases political engagement beyond voting, and that it benefits left-leaning parties. So, how do you categorize your arguments under these five categories? Where do your three blocks fall under these three categories?
Okay, so I would say that it's in large part the normative question, which is to say the legitimacy of the processes of democracy are enhanced by compulsory voting. And it's additionally the electoral outcomes question, but not as framed like you did, left versus no move towards the left, but rather as electoral outcomes, meaning that in general there will be a move away from extremist public policy.
I see. Okay, so yeah, so all three fall under normative to some extent, and your blocks also fall under the political engagement as well. Or
Okay, well, I mean, look, the political engagement question I think is subsumed by the electoral outcomes question. In other words, the ultimate outcome of the elections process will be less extremism in public policy. So if the political engagement question is embraced by my case, it's instrumentally not as an outcome in and of itself, but rather as causing some of these other outcomes. So the real answer is the impacts occur on the normative question and on the electoral outcomes question, and the political engagement question is addressed in my warrants.
all right, great. I think that should add it across.
All right, cool. That was good, Jeffrey.
Oh yeah.
So that cross-examination between my ninth grade debater was cross-examining me. Um, I wish he were still in middle school so I could point out that that's a middle schooler in me, right? But he's not. He's in high school now, so he's a ninth grader. The, the I hope to point out something. This kid is engaged in actual civil discourse, like meaningful discourse. In other words, he's asking me questions about what would it mean? How would we know if he's right? How would we know if I'm right? And what exactly do I mean with this? And okay, so if I were to, how would I know that I've falsified that? If I were to defeat this point with meow, would that be sufficient for me to win that chain of arguments at least? And you'll note that my responses are not lying. I am not avoiding being pinned down. I'm acknowledging that having chosen to make affirmation X means I'm committed to meow, meow, meow. That's called how to debate. The thing that occurs on the internet here when I debate, now look, Matt is massively more knowledgeable about philosophy and philosophical matters and has probably thought about them much more deeply than my ninth grade student. I am not denying his overall intelligence or skill level at all. but he would be a lost babe in the woods if we asked him to participate in this. He has no idea how to do this because it's a skill. It's a real skill. It's a science, and an art. And the lay people, as we call them in the debate community, we refer to everybody who's not a debater as the laity. Why? Because they don't understand. If you get a lay judge who comes in, they might vote on. I was party to a horrible fucking travesty of debate justice one time when I voted for the right person, of course. It was a 3-judge panel. One of the other judges made it was just new and was trying her best, but just made a dumb decision. She didn't understand that the framework was irrelevant and that it was perfectly acceptable for the other team to concede the framework because they were validating under that framework. So she didn't get that. She missed it. Then the third guy, he said, here's why I voted for the losing team, the team that really lost, should have lost. And he proceeded to make a bunch of arguments they didn't make, right? So this sort of thing happens in debate where people think that opinion having and voicing and, defending is the same as actually debating a point. It's not. We need to take public discourse and discourse about public policy matters much more seriously. And when you see this 9th grader and hear this 9th grader and I engaging in it, I hope it drives home the distance between what the laity does as far as debate and what people who actually know what they're doing do. And he's a 9th grader. So, I hope this video is instructive. I don't mean to be just shaming or whatever, but I want to provide an example of what the alternative looks like. Remember, political affirmations, advocacies, are what you want to force on everyone. So it should not be easy to affirm. He needs to be able to successfully defend that, in fact, we can be quite certain these impacts he's claiming are going to be manifest and that we're going to all enjoy the fruits of them. Right? So this is where you're going with the neg frame, is you're basically saying this debate is itself a political exercise, and we have a chance now to practice doing it right. Practice doing it right means we don't affirm nonsense because we know that affirming is a much worse thing to do. Affirming means force on everyone. Negating means don't do that. So we better be really sure that something should be affirmed. And okay, so you just saw a clip of me offering some coaching about how to argue a given position, basically, to Jeffrey. And then what's coming up next is a little clip that shows Jeffrey rebutting just a few of my points. And the first few of them, he does a great job of rebutting them. There's one he makes a mistake on. I stop and indicate what the mistake is. And it shows you that, hopefully it reveals that there are hugely better and hugely worse ways of approaching a given argument. And that understanding how and why and when and stuff is ultimately the determining factor in philosophizing. Philosophy is arguing without an opponent. It's debating nobody. And then if you don't ever actually take these ideas and sort of argumentational practices out into the world and use them, then you will not be very good at the thing that you've been studying for a super long time. And that's just the reality of it. So we all benefit from not being so susceptible to Dunning-Kruger. Debate makes people ultra susceptible to Dunning-Kruger. They think that because they don't know anything about it, they assume they're way better at it and way more competent at it than they ever remotely are. But with a little bit of education in the subject matter, the studies have shown that Dunning-Kruger diminishes dramatically after just a short amount of instruction on something. Then people go, oh shit, this is difficult. This is a big, deep pool of information. So, and we're all susceptible to it. I don't know anything really about rocket science. So I'm sure I could figure it out. Because since I don't know how hard it is, of course I could. But, I probably couldn't. And debate is figure outable by any TI user, TI 1.2 for sure. But you have to be humble and acknowledge that you don't know anything first.
I will try that. Time starts now. First, I'd like to start by addressing my opponent's value and value criterion. So, my opponent's value is stability. That's a very similar value to my own, which is defensibility. So, I don't think there's really any clash between these values as these values and cross-ups. I can win under both perfectly fine. His value criterion of optimizing democratic habits is also fine because it's exactly the type of value criterion that my values support, and I can win under that perfectly fine. Now going on to address my opponent's block one. His first card was called Liu B, where he talks about how compulsory voting is harmful, or compulsory voting is necessary because the barrier is participation. However, my response to this argument is my son A card, which is that understanding voting as an expressive rather than beautiful act more accurately represents how humans psychologically relate to casting ballot. Quote, this perspective is based on the purely instrumental or outcome-oriented view of the act of voting, and alternative see voting as expressive in its intent. Citizens vote for reasons other than the anticipated net or instrumental benefits derived from the electoral outcome. They vote to show support or solidarity or simply to participate in one of democracy's great civic opportunities. So what this card shows here is that my opponent's UB card on how the barrier to participation is wrong. Voting is an expressive, not beautiful act. Now going on to my opponent's second card, Smith 13. My opponent's Smith 13 card says that whenever we use any form of totalizing worldview as a framework...
Pause for 1 second. Pause for 1 second. So when you link that Son A card to the argument of barriers to participation, if we understand voting as self-expression, then even people who aren't voting are expressing themselves still.
Oh, okay.
So they are all participating in the way that they choose to, either by not voting or voting.
I see. Okay. So
redo the flow packing, or I'm sorry, redo the analysis on Son A, and then go into the Smith thing, and then we're done.
Sure. All right. So analysis on my opponent's UB card. So when my opponent says that voting is that the barrier to voting is participation, my opponent doesn't understand that voting is an expressive, not a beautiful act. Meaning that those who don't vote are expressing that they do not wish to vote for some reason or another. Meaning that my opponent doesn't gain any impact from Liu B because my opponent is wrong on the matter that the barrier is participation. No, the fact is that voting is an expressive act about voters expressing their opinions, and those who don't vote are expressing their wish not to vote. Now going on to address my opponent's Smith 13 card. I agree with this card because my opponent's Smith 13 card is designed to counter any form of framework that prioritizes a virtue value such as justice or morality or such. However, I actually win. This card also benefits me as well because I'm not using a virtue value. Defensibility is a very similar value to stability, and therefore my opponent gains no impact from the Smith 13 card.
Since it only links to the resolutional question of compulsory voting through the opponent's discursive approach.
This only links to the value to the
resolutional question.
The resolutional question through the my opponent's discursive what? I'm a bit confused.
My opponent's discursive approach. In other words, this only works as a card if I am doing the kind of discourse that this works on, right? So this is a rabbit trap. But if I'm not a rabbit, if I'm instead a bird, I'm not going to get trapped in it. It doesn't have any impact, right?
Yeah.
This rabbit trap doesn't impact me because I'm a bird, is what you're saying, basically. All right. Sure. All right, so that's it. Good job, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you later. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.